Transpacific up 250% on the short-term market since February compared to 2016. This underlying volatility in the market has changed.
Nils, why don't you tell us why you're so happy about yourself?
The core idea is that container shipping is not answering supply and demand 101. We have many more ships coming that we say, oh, the book is 3 million TEU, never seen before, blah, blah, blah. It's good for journalists, it's not good enough for me.
Before we joined the call, he said he has seen the light. He has an idea the market structure, how it's going to change. So please enlighten us.
We have a new head of FMC. If I was to find a new scapegoat for crossing America, I could be hitting at that as my next target.
That doesn't make any sense.
This is a scenario it feels like MSC has been preparing for. There's no other way to explain why. All right, I'm happy to be back on this call with, I think TPM was a couple months ago. And Nils has been chasing us nonstop to tell us how right he was about his prediction. He made a good prediction. So now we have to get on the call. And I didn't want to do the call by myself. So I convinced Fabio from Xeneta to join us. Nils has the goods. Fabio has the data. I'll ask the question. So that's the setup today.
You invited me to do a podcast to tell Nils that he was right. Exactly. Not fair.
Well, he's right. He's right. But we still have to determine if he was just lucky or he's right for the good reason, because we also have a very big announcement, partnership, right? So that we keep that for the end of the episode. So you have to watch till the end, right? I swear it's going to be a very interesting episode, but at the end of something very exciting we're going to announce together. So anyway, back to you, Nils. Why don't you tell us why you're so happy about yourself?
How long do we have?
It's very presidential, if you guys have not noticed, it's...
No, yeah, thank you for indulging my French appetite of being right. The worst thing is that everybody's going to believe what you said, right? Because,
it's true.
No, it could be true. Yeah, so listen, a few months ago, I had the chance to be on the Fred Buyers podcast with Mike King, that we all love and hope that he has recovered. It was with Peter Sand, right, the chief analyst in Xeneta, and Cathy Liu from Shanghai. A great podcast in which we discussed, the full year of 2025 and what we believe will happen in 2026. At the time, I made a prediction, and I basically said that 2026 for me might be the normalization year, but will be nothing like normal. The industry is not really responding anymore to supply and demand, 101 at least. Now I have seen, and you all have seen, GRI of $2,000, $3,000. Carriers didn't know that was possible 10 years ago. I think 2026 might still be a good year for the carriers. The core idea is that for me, container shipping is not answering supply and demand 101. It's not driven by the same kind of dynamics that we had changed. Well, it happened. We learned that market can flip in a week. We learned that GRI, general rate increase, or rate recovery, PSS, can swing in 1 week by $1,000, $2,000 or even $3,000. I don't know, Fabio, of course, you may have followed CMA a few weeks ago posted a PSS of $3,500 per 40-footer I-Cube on the US West Coast.
But I think, unless you tell me that you were able to predict the Middle East conflict.
Of course not, of course. And so that's where I start my boasting, is that I predicted that because of the phenomena called volatility, we will see markets trades turning in a week or two, and it will take time for the decrease. And I believe that some of the things also in your Q2 analysis you're mentioning. Now to go down from those high rates, will take weeks, if not months, for the market to normalize again. So that's the basis.
I think you're right. I think there are different dynamics, right? If you look at it long term, it's really a supply and demand question. And last year, I think we forecasted that we were going to return to Red Sea, and that has changed as well. So we don't see a return until mid-2027, which will absorb part of this capacity. But if you were a carrier, and when we met at TPM, you were looking at a loss-making year. February. At the same time, you see carriers order book, and there's so much demand coming into the market. Now carriers are adjusting a bit their rotations, their networks. And what we see is that freight rates are spiking because of cost of fuel and capacity crunches and constraints around the world. Despite the fact that it's a regional conflict, this is not really regional. Every trade lane has been affected by this, and we see Transpacific up 250% on the short-term market since February. So it's really a global crisis that affected everyone and that completely shifted the profitability outlook for carriers. We agree now with your prediction. I think you were probably lucky when you made it, but the
All
market
right.
has shifted a lot.
Let me try to convince you. Yeah, let me try to convince you a bit further that I was not just lucky. You mentioned things that are very true. The order book for the carriers is high and highest, right? I say it's nothing. Let's say that an Asia North Europe service today, if you look at EC data, takes about 14 ships, right? So it used to be 11. We have congestion down to 13, 14, depending on the service, right? So to be true to the community, when you say we have 3 million TEU capacity coming, you must do two things. One, you must split that into a huge bracket of capacity. And second, you must remind the community that it takes 5 to 11 to 15 ships to do a service. So that's not such a massive increase. I build on this point to tell you again why I think I was not just lucky. Red Sea and Hormuz are amplifiers. They have created a situation that, of course, I could not predict at all, and I never would say that I've thought about it. It multiplied the effect. But I'm arguing that even without that, carriers may have made a positive year. And I was talking about the billions they're going to make. I was talking about 100 to a few hundred millions for the top fives. Why arguing that capacity coming from the yards will be stuck in any case into the ports? If you look at Shanghai situation, just to take one, we know that Shanghai is chronically now suffering from a 3 days average waiting time, which was not the case 5 years ago. And you take that for every port in China, etc., etc. Basically, if you look at the service that goes around the world and go back to Shanghai, maybe ships were 2 days delay once upon a time to arriving 10, 14 days delay.
So I have a question here. So then it feels like what you're saying is not necessarily carrier taking actions. It's more the victim of this congestion in the terminal because of operational. It's difficult to serve those massive ships, and the infrastructure is not ready to handle that because of demand, right?
Things you have to realize is a tripartite relationship, right? That's why I'm making this weird thing with my fingers.
Huh? I thought you were doing a sign to me.
No. It's not East Coast, I promise. So the idea is that carriers are the customers of the terminals, right? So of course, when a carrier says, I'm going to reach highest level of reliability, they need to have strong partnerships with the terminals to make it happen, because without that, they are just making a promise.
But think about it, for reliability, the carriers, they tend to use their own terminal as much as they possibly can, right? Where they get some sort of priority of berthing. And so we also see it's also a different network strategy. If you go more hub and spoke into own big, large terminal, I think you have more control. And I think that's what we have seen with Gemini versus the rest so far.
I'm not disagreeing with that. And that's partly the answer to Bertrand, right? But what I'm saying is that not every terminal is owned by a carrier, notably in China, right, where terminals remain state property. And therefore, at any rate, even if you control more and more of the chain after, you are still through the same bottlenecks. And of course, there have been exercises where, for example, Gemini has now dedicated terminals phases in Shanghai, in Yangshan, etc. But again, you can control end-to-end this supply chain. That doesn't exist.
So the argument is because you cannot control everything, there's bottleneck will always happen. I think my main question is, are carriers good at managing, because they're taking action such that also they can control the downside? Whereas before it was a prisoner's dilemma, everybody's cutting rates, I cut the rate to fill my ship. Also a factor, a big factor.
And I'm looking forward to hear from Fabio also on that. But you can see, for example, Ocean Alliance, not to name a specific carrier within it, right? But they don't have enough ships to perform all the rotations. And they do best endeavor. They really have a very strong push on operations to have the ships returning to Asia the fastest. Maybe that's also why they were one of the first to take back Suez, right? And despite that, they don't have enough ships. So the supply of ships in 2027 and 8, of course, is going to help and resolve some of that. And there are 1,000 things that can change by then, right? But I think the paradigm where people used to say carriers are happy of congestion and and they are okay to blank, they are okay to have a sliding, and I remember maybe those days, that doesn't exist anymore. They are really pushing any and everything, being investment, being ships, being terminals, being process topic, to fasten turnaround. What do you think, Fabio?
don't think your argument of you need more ship because there's more delay or more congestion in the port, I don't think it makes a lot of sense from a shipper side. From a shipper side, you still want a reliable weekly service that you know is departing at the same time every week, that you can plan your supply chain to minimize your inventory and capital moving around. But I do think that after COVID, carriers have learned a lot how to manage capacity better. They have gotten a few years of very good returns and profit, which they can absorb with different choices. And so if you see the market, currently we're in a phase and see that the spikes and the movement in the short-term market are much more frequent. They go much higher and much lower. So this underlying volatility and dynamics in the market has changed compared to 2016 when carriers were losing money and they were coming from a money lost time. I think today we have a very different situation. I think carriers got also much better to figure out how and where to apply different surcharges. And one of the feedback that we got the most over the last few months from shippers is around bunker cost, additional charges, bunker cost. And we have seen it also in a situation where you have an index-linked contract, but maybe it adjusts quarterly or it adjusts monthly. So you have those kind of discrepancies between the market and what you're paying for. And the carriers are quickly to try to monetize that, which I think makes sense because if your operational cost is going up, you have somewhat to recover this cost, especially in the short-term market. And this creates an interesting dynamic where if you look at the short-term market, it goes up and down, up and down. It's very, very spiky. But if you look at the long-term market, it's still somewhat stable. And think about this. Many shippers, they were at TPM negotiating their tender with rates starting April 1st. That was incredibly noisy time to go tender. Many shippers, they decided to extend rates. They say, I'm not making a decision now. I'm going to extend my contract rates. I'm going to wait. Now, if you waited, now you see rates going up. We have some rates, Transpacific, 250% up on the short-term market. So now is not necessarily a better time to go and try to tender and fix some long-term rates. So as a shipper, you're struggling to find the right timing to market, and you're struggling to decide whether you go with a short-term contract that follows more the short-term rate, which guarantees you space and ability to move the cargo, or you try to get a long-term contract, but you don't know if that's going to hold over time.
Fully appreciate that. Just to close on my point on capacity and terminals, I'm not so much making the point that we need more ships and stuff on water. I'm making the point that the length of the quay is always the same, and there's not much investment into that, but we have many more ships coming. So the capacity that we say, oh, the book is 3 million TEU, never seen before, blah, blah, blah. It's good for journalists. It's not good enough for me. Because again, this capacity is going to get stuck in front of the port. That's more my point. And for the shippers, and I think you're right to remind me to reorient the discussion on that. If I were a shipper tomorrow, I will work with carriers that control more and more of their operations. So the ones that control terminals, the ones that have partnerships, etc., those will be the ones I work with.
I have an anecdote to share also. I heard from more than one terminal operators, like actually they are relooking at their contracts, right? So everybody in their contract with the carriers, they couldn't charge the surcharge. So there's a situation where they were getting screwed because they had to bunker with more expensive fuel. It wasn't built in their contract. So everybody's learning the hard way to look at the contract. But I want to push back a little bit. Do you think the fact that people are reacting faster, right, is also a function that is more transparency, more visibility in data? Maybe 2016, it's more like a gentleman's club. You handshakes, you do deal, things not moving too fast. Right now, you have a screen. You can have the analysts, not just you guys, but everybody's talking about the market. And suddenly, we have a spot thing moving. You have the index contract. Now you have future you can trade. Isn't that also creating more noise, more volatility? And I used to trade, but I don't really know how it would behave in this kind of environment with the markets. I just see the market moving. So what do you think about this?
I definitely think that over the last 10, 15 years, volatility, transparency into the market has increased a lot. I don't necessarily think that impacts rate that much. I do still think it's a game of how full your ship are if you're a carrier, and what's the cost that you need to charge in order to be able to recover your bunker cost, your chartering cost, and so on. But definitely it's getting easier and easier to get a grasp on the market. I think because carriers are getting much better at managing capacity. When we say managing capacity, what we mean is they're able to do blank sailings. They're able to move and reshuffle the network. I think if you only look at the rates and you say the rates are going up, you're only looking at part of the story. You need to look, rates are going up, but this carrier is going to the 80%, 69% on time performance like Gemini. Or yes, rates are a bit lower, but this carrier is going to do 4 blank sailings out of 5 in a month. From a shipper perspective, most of the time, what you really care about is for your goods to get to destination. The shippers, they understand their carriers, their profitability. They need to run a healthy business in order to be able to provide the service. Nobody that I've ever talked to debate that. But what shippers usually complain about is when they see the carriers are trying to double dip, or they're trying to squeeze out more because there's an advantage in the market. So I tell you a story. I was talking to a shipper the other week, and we were talking about fuel surcharges. And this shipper understood that there was a cost for carriers when the Middle East crisis happened. They wanted to help the carriers, so they accepted fuel surcharges. For the last 3 months, they paid additional fuel surcharges. Now the carrier is going back to the bunker formula, but they're using the fuel surcharge that they charge as a new baseline to calculate the 3 months of fuel. That doesn't make any sense. Still have shippers trying to squeeze a few more dollars when the market goes down, moving into the spot. And you still have carriers trying to charge additional surcharges, even when there is no additional cost for them. So I think there's still a trust and relationship aspect to the business. And that's what I think data can help you solve, but it's not as transparent as we think this should be.
That's what we discussed in TPM, right? So giving the cheaper price may not be the best thing for you. So I'm curious also to ask you more. I think one thing I don't fully understand, so this one, just more clarification. The disruption is in Middle East. Why is the price going up everywhere else?
Yeah, so we were checking some numbers yesterday. It's a crisis that developed in different stages. The first stage is you have some ships stuck into the Strait of Hormuz. We have containers being left everywhere, and carriers, they need to reestablish their rotations. They need to figure out how they're going to go around it. So we have seen new services being launched and kind of ways for carriers to still serve the region without the ports. So there is about 10% of the world capacity that is being impacted by this closure. Is obviously the cost of fuel, which has been a big factor, and I see it on the air side as well. Even if you try to buy a flight ticket for yourself, you see that the air price is up. So there are structural costs that are passed to the carriers. Some of the biggest bunkering ports are in the region that is affected. Then there are changes in rotations and cargo flows. So if you look at China to Middle East, the market is down something like 17%. Where did that demand go? China's demand grew for everywhere around the world except US and Middle East. Carriers, they need to react to that. They need to move ships around. They need to decide how to rearrange certain rotations, and that has a cost. At the same time, we also hear that there's an early peak season. Talking to a company who is selling Christmas trees, and they're saying we're moving Christmas trees now, which is very weird. And we haven't heard it before. But because of all this geopolitical instability, war, tariffs, some shippers are moving cargo as soon as they can, whenever they can, to try to avoid disruptions in the future. And it's cheaper for some shippers to keep high inventory of Christmas trees versus getting to Thanksgiving with the risk that you don't have enough. So it's a combination of different factors, and this we believe is causing the short-term market to kind of spike.
That's true, Fabio. If that means later on it's going to be crashing also. So if I'm a shipper, should I wait?
We have a lot of shippers now that they're trying to change a bit the cycle. So instead of procuring in first part of the year, Q1, with new rates coming in effect April, May, they're trying to move it towards the end of the year. And that's more typical for European shippers usually, but Q3, Q4 is more of a negotiation time, and then January 1st, you start the new rates. But there is really no crystal ball to tell us if in January next year the rates are going to be better. For sure, we know that the spike that we see now is very similar to what we've seen in the beginning of the Red Sea market. And it might be well worth it for now extending your contracts or trying to go into a short-term deal until you have more visibility on what's your 2027 budget and how do you want to play that. You can always try to be cheap, and you're going to have the highest risk.
What do you think, Nils?
Yeah, 100% echo and align what Fabio said. Again, I don't like the word managing capacity, but I appreciate that Fabio put brackets into it because yes, okay, it's like managing a portfolio, you're not doing anything wrong, and you're just doing your work. I just bounce back on one point. It's the fact that the Red Sea or the Hormuz crisis, as any crisis, they are never isolated. I tried to explain that also at TPM the year before when I was a speaker, that tariff, congestion, all of that has an effect way beyond the trade lane or the port it is located on. So if you have suddenly a spike of demand from China to Vietnam, you need the containers, and also it will impact the turnaround time of those containers. It will bring more containers into a zone where maybe you have a hard time to pull them out also. So I encourage people to understand that this is a web, a network is a web. So something happening in Hormuz can impact an Asia to Australia rate very quickly. To reinforce the point, as Fabio said, carriers needed to pull ships to replace on the lanes that were affected, also to redeploy on trade lanes that suddenly had demand spiking. So the volumes that didn't went to Middle East, they went somewhere, right? And usually try to go in places where the turnaround of the assets is faster. So you, as a shipper, you can of course have a less capital expenditure on water, etc., etc. So that's why you see blank sailing. So blank sailing is not just a commercial aspect; it has also an operational aspect sometimes. And I've seen that many times. I'm sure Fabio can see it in data also. The Asia-Australia trade is one of the trades that is the first affected when suddenly you need a ship to do an Asia-Red Sea extra loader because the demand is for Red Sea. And then what happens if you have every carrier doing a blank sailing a few weeks in a row on an Asia-Australia? Well, it will also increase the rates.
In a way, the carrier is not in a bad position because you control somewhat the assets. But we also heard a lot of stories from freight forwarders that are stuck in the middle of this. They maybe have had shippers where they're selling with a contract for $2,000, and now the rates they're getting from the carriers is $8,000, and you have less ability to control the assets and move around. And so even a trickier position, I think, to be in.
Wait, sorry. That's a crazy story for me, because my mindset was always freight forwarders, they buy in bulk, they get big contract, they get discount, and then they sell higher. So you're saying right now you've heard story of freight forwarder who can stuck between the two? How did they end up in that position? That's something I don't quite understand.
Freight forwarder it can operate in different ways. You could buy spot from the carriers and then you resell it as in a contract. For example, you take the risk. You could have a contract both ways. You have a contract from your carrier and then you have a contract with your shipper. Now, if the cost from the carrier all of a sudden goes up, so the carrier comes to the forwarder and they say, okay, now it's no longer $2,000, but it's $2,000 plus bunker surcharge plus peak season surcharge, and there is a GRI coming. All of a sudden, your cost structure that you sold to your shipper is different. So you need to either you go back to your shipper and you kind of negotiate this. It's a bit more of a difficult conversation because you don't have necessarily cost of the assets.
Actually, I always was impression the freight forwarder can pass the cost, but that's quite interesting.
With your shipper and a negotiation with your shipper, and you might be trying to increase rates 4x in a trade lane that is not affected by the Middle East war. You have to make sure that you have a good relationship with the shippers that you're working with so that they understand why your cost has changed. And you always need to remember whatever goes up is going to come down. There's going to be a time where you're going to have the opposite situation where rates are going slow. They're going down so fast. And are you going to pass those savings to the same shippers that now we're trying to charge more? I think the forwarders and the carriers that are doing the best are the ones that recognize that.
I wonder if do people use your data set to do this, to tell this story? Meaning, hey, 2 years ago, I did you a solid one. Look at that's what happened, and now do me a solid one. Is there functionality like this on Xeneta?
Yeah, all the time, especially comparing long-term market and your contracts versus what's happening in the short-term market. And that is used both ways, right? Is the shipper negotiating and trying to understand? Again, the shippers understand there is a cost and they're okay with that as long as it's legit. But it's also used from forwarders and carriers to explain why rates are moving.
I see. Yeah, no, that sounds super interesting. I think Nils is really hungry to go for his big prediction. So before we join the call, he said he has seen the light. He has an idea the market structure, how it's going to change. So please enlighten us.
Right, and the sun is shining at the same time, so I'm definitely in my cocky element. To all the people out there, believe I am a very nice guy. I'm not such a so French, but yeah, it's okay for today. So my prediction is actually a scenario that I have in my mind that I haven't seen spoken about anywhere, and I just would like to have it on record first, of course, to be able to say I was right, maybe one other time. Okay, so here I go with my crazy new idea. We have a US administration that, we like or not, is here to stay. I don't know what will be the after the next administration, but could imagine that it will be in the same trend and tendency, right? We have a new head of FMC, who is a lady that is definitely a fighting type. She's not here just to, hold the fort and not do anything about it, right? We have seen some ruling, I believe, on OOCL recently, and there can be more. Do you remember why alliances were allowed to exist?
I do not.
Enlighten us.
So alliances were part of sort of a remedy solution presented to the non-competitive organization to say, if you don't allow us to form large alliances, we have a structural cost problem. This is after the 2008 and 10 crisis. Please let us do alliances between us. It will help to serve the market, have vaster, bigger network, lower the costs, etc. And if you don't do it, honestly, we're all gonna all bankrupt. So you saw Ocean Alliance, Premier Alliance, formerly known as Z Alliance, etc., etc. This mechanism, this idea of having not only a VSA, so a vessel sharing agreement on one service, which is a contract, right, but to have a group of VSAs, a large corporation established, was sort of allowed and presented again as the only way forward to save costs and serve customers. Now we are out of basically 5 years where carriers have made money, right? Decent money. What's the rationale for alliances to still exist tomorrow? And I can argue for it because, again, I come from it and I see the benefits. But if I was to be the chair of an FMC or to find a new scapegoat for why a cost in America on a pack of beef went from $44 to $75, I could be hitting at that as my next target. What is the aftermath of this? Gemini cannot maybe exist. Ocean Alliance cannot exist in this current form. The only one player that is alone and capable is MSC, right? With 1,000 ships, 20% plus market share. I mean, then MSC has done the best play ever and has a gift of foresight that is way behind mine. I don't see talked about in the news why we see more and more an active FMC that's creating precedents here and there. And China, by the way, reinforcing its own legislation to say, hey, you don't have to cope with international rulings from a foreign country, right? So what do you guys think? How crazy am I?
It's very interesting. I would think about what's the rationale from the US consumer, right? Because you're going to increase carriers' cost and making it, if anything, more and more expensive without collecting a fee. Like it could be a Chinese vessel port fee. I can see that because the story is we're going to collect so much money through this. I don't see the same benefit on breaking the alliances. With this administration, nothing is off limit, and I would not pretend that I have a better prediction than yours. So it's definitely interesting.
And for me, if the alliance break, each carrier will want to maintain a form of service. And therefore, you may see more services available tomorrow with decreased reliability and decreased consistency on the water. And the new order book coming could facilitate that. If you want to collect port fees from non-American shipping lines, which is easy, then you could collect more. Not saying that there is a huge rationale to do so, but I don't think this administration has shown that they need to be rational. I think they want to show that they are active. I think they want to do stuff.
Please don't give them advice, please.
They won't listen to us, it's okay.
Please don't give them advice. Yeah, no, my reaction, I think it's super interesting thought exercise because I agree with you. This is a scenario it feels like MSC has been preparing for, right? There's no other way to explain why you buy so many ships, you control so many terminal. It feels like, yeah, we're hedging for that scenario that can happen. And it is a black swan scenario, but I can see many ways where it potentially happen. Because especially right now, it feels like it's a kind of a zero-sum game between the regulator. People don't think downstream what's the impact. So one example I can think is export control, right? With the chips for China, and then they do we're going to do rare earth. And so it's like, wait, why are we doing all this? Like maybe let's take a step back. And you can definitely see someone starting by pointing the scapegoat. Now, I'm not sure FMC is so sophisticated to make the argument that you just made, right? It's like the reason you have that is because you were not making money, right? So I'm not sure they'll do that. So I tend to agree with Fabio in the sense that what's in it for them? Like if they do that, how does the Trump administration can claim, hey, I made America great again? Like that, I think is kind of missing. But
But they will claim that, look at those carriers, those foreign-owned companies, right? Those are Europeans and Chinese that made so much money on the back of Americans.
yeah, I think, yeah.
But you're not
I think you give a lot of credit to
you're
American
not
administration,
solving-
right?
I see the argument. I don't think you're solving it by splitting the carriers up. That will just increase cost, and you still do not have a US flag global
I
carrier.
agree, and I don't say that they will solve it. I'm saying that they will just kick in the ant pot.
That's actually true. A Trump administration would do stuff where there's a
I mean,
stated fact, and the result
the
is not
Iron
exactly
Wall
the
was
policy.
meant to solve anything. Sorry.
Yes, a thought experiment if it to happen. So MSC well prepared. How about Gemini? How would you think they respond?
Okay, you want another crazy thought experiment? Okay, maybe this one is more rational for you guys. Do you think that Gemini is the final form of this cooperation, or could there be that one day we see an M&A between Maersk and Hapag?
Yeah.
I think there is a world where there is more consolidation across the ocean carriers. And I also see there's also a scenario where overcapacity plays out and we return to the Red Sea. All of a sudden, there are new ships, so much capacity, and the bigger players are going to decrease rates to squeeze out the smaller player to potentially make an acquisition. I think we have seen it in the past in similar form. If I were to try to mitigate the risk, I would probably buy ships and try to stand alone by myself. So I see MSC positioning, which, by the way, has been very consistent. You know, when I was working at MSC, it was still the same strategy. We buy ships and we keep growing and growing and growing.
Yeah, actually, that's interesting because then you also almost you give us the recipe of a solution, right? So if indeed FMC goes for that direction, that just means massive consolidation, effectively.
And you already have somewhat a monopoly, and you're going to make that even bigger. So then I would maybe see a better argument for FMC trying to intervene and trying to figure out how do we avoid few carriers holding U.S. trade and commerce hostage. I'm not saying that I believe that's the right wording. I'm saying that this is probably going to be the narrative.
No, that's very interesting. I give you a point for this prediction. I think it's
Thank you.
It's interesting. That's a good one. Let's don't drag more. Let's talk about the announcement. So, Fabio, do you want us to do the honor to announce why we're on the call today?
Yes. So we are holding this year the 10th Xeneta Summit. It's going to be November 4th and 5th in Munich, in Germany. And we're going to have two special guests, which are Nils and Bertrand, who are going to join us, and they're going to help us give you some information and context of what's going on, as well as recording a lot of podcast and conversation just like this one. And we have an amazing audience of supply chain and procurement professionals that are going to join us. So I am super excited, and I want to say thank you guys for joining us, and looking forward to it.
Really thankful actually for your trust and the trust of the Xeneta team. I hope we won't fuck it up. We're going to tell a good story. But I think it's super amazing that you guys have managed to set up this business. At 10th anniversary is really deserve a special event to tell the story. I would love to have the conversation with Patrick, Bjorn, Peter, everyone who made Xeneta possible, right? Really understand what's going on, and also be excited to learn the future. What do you see yourself for the next 10 years? I think that's also be super exciting. Nils?
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity. I mean, we had a blast at TPM. I think you saw the value. We definitely see immense value to talk with your customers and hear from other minds why we are wrong, why we are right, and what we can do better. So again, thanks.
We love this format. We love the opinions that you guys have. So I think it's a win-win, and I'm excited for it.
Great.
Awesome.
See you in Munich then.
See you all. Thank you.
Yep.
Cheers.